welcome to another episode of About Her. Today I'm on with the beautiful Nathalie Saunderson. Nathalie, I'm so happy to have you here, and I'm really, really excited to see what wisdom you want to share. I would love to start with you sharing a bit of your journey, where you are right now, and how you came there.
That is a big first question, but first, thank you for having me. Thank you for having me on. And it's lovely to meet new faces and also just hear everything that you're creating, because these are such important conversations that I think a lot of women are really tapping into this deep well of wisdom of people who have walked different paths, right? So currently we live in Bali. So my daughter and I live in Bali, but my personal path, my spiritual path began very long ago, probably around, I would say really kicked off around 12. Before that, just a very sensitive and tuned child with a lot of intuition that was maybe not the easiest to hold, but also I was in my, house of upbringing. So I had my family to kind of buffer that. Getting a little bit older, though, I was very quick to realize I was somewhat psychic. So that was something that really led me to devote myself to yoga. So I got into yoga. It was like one of the kind of like staple, I guess, tools that I had at that time. There was a lot of like seeking and traveling and growing through all those years, teenage years, early 20 years. There's just so many chapters that I could share, but my through line was yoga. And I taught yoga for about 14 years full time. And that only changed when I had my daughter. So within those years, working with people so closely, I really started to see and develop, I guess, skills that weren't just about my journey, right? Because I could see and feel into other people. When you have so many people coming in front of you and you see their bodies and their energy fields and their breathing. How does that part of the body relate to what they're saying out of their mouth and what I'm seeing? So that was kind of the first chapter, even though it was a very long one, and slowly led me to a lot of different energy work as I grew older. And then I would say, motherhood was a very different chapter because there was a sense of maturity that happened in me as a woman, and my spiritual practices changed, and my full-time career as a yoga teacher changed, and so many things changed, and we moved to Bali. So it's like, let's just say it was university. And you keep thinking, you're at this, you are always stepping into new arenas of who you are. And sometimes you're aware of it and sometimes you're not. But that's kind of the short version of yoga has been probably my through line, because I find it's very difficult to handle and receive source energy or insight if you are not at peace with your body. So it's almost impossible to hold those downloads, or whatever you'd like to call them, if your body is in pain, if you're not comfortable in your body, right? So all of these things, it's like, this is the instrument.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. I love that. And there are so many questions popping up. So the first one that comes to my mind is like what I see very much, or what I've always observed. I'm like a big observer. So I love just watching and seeing what comes up. And what always puzzled me is like in this spiritually growing community, so much is still focused on the mind and mindset work. Don't get me wrong. I think it's a big part. But what you touched on is like, how can we hold this big divine energy when our body is in not such a healthy state, when we do feel pain, when we have like physical resistance of any kind, or maybe just not the awareness of what our body needs. And so what I love is that you are combining those two, because I feel like there is still this separation. There's this duality of so many people are doing yoga, but they're doing it for their body looking good, or for like lifestyle, decision, but not for building the vessel to hold the divine energy. And I think that's what we ultimately are here to do. It's not only spirituality and it's not only the physical. Neither of them is better or less good than the other, but it's for us to combine. And I feel that's often missing. So yeah, I love that you touched on that. And I would love to know like how you feel in your like really deep yoga practice, how you feel people are coming. Are they coming like for the physical betterment, or are they coming for the spiritual growth of yoga, which is definitely there?
I honestly have kind of an interesting vantage point because I have almost been 2 decades. I just turned 40. And that's a lot of years to see an industry. Let's call it an industry, even though it's more of a process or an awakening that people have really found something in the practice of yoga. And I can say from where I started, I was always like 1 or 2 steps kind of ahead of who I was teaching. That's how it felt, right? Even though when I was young, I was teaching, people in midlife, but I was feeling something through the practice. And it does start out for many people because their mental ability to process life and feel at peace with life isn't keeping up to what's happening in life. So it's kind of this nervous system de-escalation that happens. And then, only then, can you start to hear the other stuff coming in, right? Because I'll just say it for what it is. It's like a lot of people, unfortunately, have to move through survival mode at some point in their life. And most of us have hit it already, pretty early on, sometimes a little bit later in life. But that is really what's coming up as we get older and move through. Like that will travel with us until we're ready to sit and unpack that, whether that's survival with your finances or survival in romance, or like it's there. I say feeling. So that's kind of the first layer. But, I feel like we've just had a massive, it's crazy to say it's almost 2025, but the past 4 years have exponentially sped up people seeking more from life and being open to more from life. And even I can say 10 years ago when I saw a larger group of men coming to the yoga mat, before it was mostly women when I began, like 90% women in the studio. And that caused other issues that I think a lot of people who are maybe listening to this, if you're in a partnership, there's a lot of women that feel like we go first in some ways, like we have this different way of interacting with life and intuition and inner knowing, and whether we have a practice or not, we have it usually. And that was a really interesting evolution because now I feel like everybody's being asked to look within and look a little deeper. Because if you're not, life can get very difficult, and you cannot save anybody else, right? That's the other piece with women. It's like we try to kind of sometimes shepherd those around us as well, our families, our loved ones, this type of thing. So I think there's more people, like for instance, when I also read astrology charts, when I say that now, it's so much more well received than when I started studying. Then it was like, oh, you think like that, oh, you're a, Gemini ascendant. Oh,
I totally know what you mean.
even I was of the era of being like, I'm a vegetarian. Everybody, oh, and then they try and argue you, like, so there's more and more people open because I think they've realized they don't know, or, with their more rigid ideas a lot of them have been challenged the past few years. That's what I feel, stability and security. It's all really we've had a really close up look about what life's about, wouldn't you say? Like,
Yes, totally. Actually, like, I know that's kind of like a hard thing to hear for many people, but when COVID hit, I was kind of very happy on one side because I thought like, no, this is it. This is now the awakening point. Now that a lot of people will get super conscious about things they haven't been before. And my husband laughed at me and said like, no, 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 I don't think we're ready then. And
yeah,
it kind of happened both. So I totally agree with you in the last few years, maybe not immediately when it hit, but like with a bit of time, there were like many more people are like considering things that they haven't before or aren't as rigid, at least in like spiritual field. Talking about the medical one, but like there is more openness to like astrology, to like I study human design.
So do
Before I
I.
even knew what that was, or like being a vegan for years and years, I was looked at very strange and laughed at. And, now it's much more easy. And on the other hand, I still feel like what my husband said about like, okay, no, we're not there yet. So I see this timeline split, how it's so lovingly called in the spiritual community. I see that very much. You touched upon it. Like if you're not growing in any way, that could be through yoga, through whatever practice you have, then things get quite hard and they get harder and harder. And you go into the survival mode so much. Like you said, I see that too. It's like before we might have had, maybe 20 years ago, we might have had like this one thing that is not working out in our life. And there's this one big issue. Now I feel everyone has like 5 to 10 of these big issues. And it's like us growing, being able to hold more, but maybe being not conscious of it. And so life is giving us a lot of stuff so that we can learn for our best. But if you don't embrace the spiritual openness to it, it might feel like it's happening to you. And it's like,
Yeah, for
I can't
sure.
think.
Yeah, I hate to say it, but I mean, even after years of spiritual practice, I don't think that anybody, in fact, the best teachers I've ever known are the ones that are very comfortable in their authenticity when they say, this is hard. Like, this is hard to hold because you have your physical, whatever's happening. You have, if you're into light work, you have your emotional, energetic, and then, like how do you then process it mentally to then act accordingly? So I would say that the capacity for people to hold those challenges, it can be difficult because we're being passed more. We have more light codes coming in. We have faster momentum. So I think that when I say, for me, yoga and the body has become almost like I was working with a detox company this year and it was really fascinating. I'm a bit of a body centric, really nerd anyway. Um, Even though I love my pizza, if you don't have a relationship with your body, whatever that looks like for you, it doesn't need to be yoga, right? It could be walking in the woods. It could be as simple, but it's that time where you're like aware of your own humanness, your vessel, because that's what you need to kind of be supporting, I think, during these times of growth, right? It sounds all lovely when we're like, oh, we're ascending, we're evolving.
It's not.
You know what? I think we need to give each other credit that there's been a lot of growth in a short space of time. And sometimes, my biggest go-to is sometimes less is more. Like
Mhm.
less scheduling, less running around, less focus. It's just the antidote to a busy, busy period in time.
Yes. Do you feel like we talked a bit of like of a bigger span of time, and I think that's super interesting that you have this like big knowledge because you're doing consistent for like 20 years this practice, and of course things come come and go, but this as a stable thing to look at. Do you think that people are getting more in touch with their body and like trying to slow down more to come out of that survival mode? Is that a conscious thing that you see, or
I think you will either do it or life will do it for you.
Mm.
I don't want to go into too much health stuff, but I think that a lot of people are very aware that the way we treat our bodies and the things we put into our bodies really have a lot to do with our immunity and how we process life. And really, that's how I see immunity. It's how can we, because stress is a disease, right? It's not about like things that we can go to a hospital and get diagnosed. It's the way that we're living and everything that we're around, from our work environments to our friendships. Like, what is the ripple effect that we're experiencing in a day? And for me, especially as a single mom, I think when I became a mom, it was really obvious that my what we call self-care, which is really just like, how am I processing life? That needs to be supported more. Obviously, any mom can hear this when I say, we have to rework a few things here. But it's like that for me needs to be a priority. I think if you want to hold more space for the spiritual aspects, whether that's your intuition or say you have a gift, I have several, you have several. And whoever's listening to this, it's like if you have a passion or a drive or that whispering or that knowing, any of these words, you're going to be asked to hold space because it's likely going to grow,
Mm.
right? So when our bodies are contracted or we're not sure what it means or where to go with it, it's difficult to allow that growth to happen. I feel I've experienced.
Yeah, true. And you've touched on something that I would love to ask you, because I know intuition is like a big, big, big part of your work. And what I do here is like try to gather tools and present tools to whoever's listening to like kind of feel into what you can do if you're in a moment of, well, I don't know what to do, or I'm like just overwhelmed with life, or there is really a struggle or a stuckness. So I know you're doing a lot of intuitive work, and that has always been the case, as you shared. Um, can you elaborate a bit on that, like how you connect and how your intuition like helped you come to where you
Well,
are? No.
yeah, for sure. I'll do two things. So first of all, I'll share what works for me when I'm working with my own life. And then I'll share how I work because they're two kind of separate. When I'm in a different role, it's different. But because you are into human design and maybe someone else on this call will have heard and know this, um, I'm a 4/6 and I'm a sacral authority. So for me, and I'm claircognizant, which I didn't know there was even a word for this thing that I had. And when I found it several years ago, I was blown away. Um, so things very quickly in my body will be yes or no.
Mhm.
Like it's very much how I've always felt about life. I know if I'm going to stay with a partner or if I'm supposed to move into that house or if I'm supposed to move to that place in the world. It's very, very easy for me. What gets in the way of that, and I think gets in the way for a lot of people, is when we're in an emotional state and we're trying to make that knowing collaborate with other agendas in our thinking minds, right? So say we go into a place of, I'd like to live somewhere else in the world, and then we add on right away, the place comes up in our chest and we feel that it's frequency, right? We feel that expansion, we feel that attraction. It's always about sensation, which is why the body's so important, right? Um, Now the frequency going up is yes, towards, right? That's positive. That's easy to register.
Mhm.
But then what happens usually with people knowing things is that they will start to add, well, that can't work because I have this job that's over here and I have my mother-in-law down the street and so it's about trusting, unfortunately. Like we need to get to a place in life where one, I think we accept that there's guidance and knowing available. And two, understanding where our fears are coming into play to make that guidance murkier,
Yeah.
right? Because sadly, that survival mode is usually quite strong in most of us when we get these hits. Oh no, I can't leave this job. It's offering me da 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 da. Because your intuition, I think, ultimately is there for your healing, which is rarely hunky dory, always fun. It might be, it can be soft, but it's going to ask you to change something or let go of something. And the body's going to have to get used to that feeling, right? Of what they've done to what they're moving into. And intuition is such a beautiful gift because when you follow it, this is the beautiful side to maybe it being uncomfortable for a moment. When you follow your intuition, I feel such relief. Like, because I listened and I'm now in a place I know I should be. When I don't follow it, we all know what that feels like. And the challenge is it sounds easy, but I'm talking about following your intuition to, maybe make some big radical changes in life. And so it can take some courage to not know how you know things, but to trust that you're in conversation with something much bigger than yourself.
Yeah. Wow, that is so beautiful and so profound, and I totally agree. What I think helps is practicing this intuition first before like you do the
Yeah,
big
the big,
of I don't know,
if
quitting
you're
the
going to do the
job
big
and
changes, get some support. Let's give a little precursor. Get some people. Most of my life, I've often had support for periods where I was making the big changes. And I could, list about 8: leaving countries, changing jobs, letting go of futures that I thought were going to happen. I had people who had already been walking their path because at the end of the day, it's like they don't tell you answers. They just hold space for you to be okay with that knowing, right? It's like it's safe. to be even considering these bigger changes. But you're right. The small things, right? Don't go out today. Let's wait till this afternoon. That's intuition. Whatever reasoning you have, choose that one versus that one at the grocery store. They're small sometimes, right? It's not always the big bangs that need to be life-changing. It's the more we listen, the better we get at listening, basically.
And we feel that feeling of empowerment. So like speaking for myself, when I finally like allowed myself to listen to my intuition again after like stuffing it down for a
Yeah.
period of time, I felt like so empowered, even in these little things. Like, do I take this side of the street or this side when I'm walking in the night, going back home from a party, you know? There's this feeling like that's safer than that. And every time I listened, or like, what food do I pick? It doesn't have to be something dramatic. It gives you this feeling of, like you said, I'm on the right path, the feeling of empowerment. And I feel when we've learned to listen to that voice, it grows stronger and we get more sure that this is
Yeah.
actually something we can trust. And then you can make that bigger changes as well. But for first, I'm a sacral 2, I'm a 1-3 generator. I have this like leaning of my whole body, yes. But
Mhm.
there are people who don't have that clear, who need to like
Oh,
first
yeah.
establish the communication with their intuition before they can learn to trust that. And maybe that's a process that takes some time, or maybe you're just as courageous to say like, well, I hear that voice loud and clear, and now I'm quitting that job and moving off over the world because that's what my intuition told me. But sometimes there is logic kicking in quite fast after the intuitive hit. And I have had many clients who had really have a hard time distinguishing between the logic and the intuition, and like how short of a time span in between.
Yeah. I think it's true because I think it's easy to say just listen, but I've had several friends that are more emotional authority, and that's very different, right? Because I don't feel as clear. When I sit and I overthink something and for a while and I don't act, it feels uncomfortable for me. But for women that need to process, okay, I'm going to sit with that decision and see how I feel. Okay, then I'm going to go to the other side and think if I don't follow that nudge and see how that feels. And they'll know through feeling into both ways. Do you know what I mean? And that's a different container altogether. But I do feel like even simple things, for in terms of self-care, one really big thing that I always am careful to watch in my life is how much do I go outside of my house? Like how much am I extroverted and exposed to Bali versus do I need to stay inside, right? Do you know what I mean? So it's as simple as like, okay, it's Friday night over here when we're recording this. Should we go out or do we need downtime? Like that is a very quick, my body will always know this is what I need.
Yeah.
To energetically.
Yeah.
Or you get that friend, that feeling when you're like, I should connect with that. That's another easy one to play with, right? Yeah.
There's so many easy ones to get to
Yeah.
know yourself better and to know the language of the universe, maybe even so that you can kind of I feel it's kind of learning a new language. It's kind of like at first you think like, oh my God, that's so hard. How do I translate it? But it gets easier, and then later on you can speak like natively language and can really trust it. And that might take some quote unquote effort, but actually can be so much fun. I've always like wanted to take the fun side of
Yeah.
this development area. Like you said, it's not always easy and growth is not always like just fun, but you can always switch to the empowered side, which is what we're talking about here, that all these tools that you use, your intuition or your feeling into your body, might be through yoga, might be just through like seeing, I love these backward forward pulls to see like, what food should I eat? What should what should I go? It's easy if you know.
Yeah. Completely. I also think that we walk every single day with no shoes on. So that's another, if you're
Beautiful.
like, to get into, we have 3 dogs and that for me is very, like a lot of the noise, I think can dissipate for a bit and I think you have a certain amount of responsibilities that keep you in the very physical reality of, dinner and all these things. And making sure that I think however you're built or designed, you're asking like, what do I need? especially when you're feeling more emotional about something. If you're looking for the intuition from that decision or from that area of your life, it's like, what do I need to support myself? And like I said, for me, it was always I needed community, or I needed nature, or I needed to also learn to trust myself. So I did a heck of a lot of experimentation to learn that even if I follow through and it doesn't work out, that's okay too, because in that process, I also gained X, Y, P, T, Z, and then I moved to the next step, right? So there's really like no wrong choosing, right? And that's a weird place to be at too,
How amazing is that? Like everything you do,
right?
you just
Yeah.
get it wrong. Isn't that like, oh my God, that's such a soothing insight.
It's strange because you know that it will naturally lead you, no
Mhm.
matter what, to your next steps, to your next steps. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with my life. And it's very interesting because it's made it very difficult to plan or force, or like you let go of a lot of those things that we were taught you kind of should be doing as an adult, right? It's like we were all told that we should know what our 65th year would look like. And that's not how I am experiencing my own life, to be honest.
I don't even know like what next week looks like. So,
Right.
well, it's a process.
But it, yeah. And trusting when you do share, I don't know. I think a lot of women heal and feel supported when they share. I have
Mhm.
a theory about this. So when you, even one friend that you can kind of, that can hold that space for you. Maybe it's a partner, maybe it's someone, but like talking through what your experience is. If you have insights that, yeah, not everybody might have or understand, right?
So true.
Yeah.
There's big wisdom in speaking, I feel, and I'm definitely not as deep into yoga as you are, but I am into it. And so like I would love to know like your take on the throat chakra, because from everything I know from my energy work or from human design, like the throat chakra as a manifesting chakra is so important. And
Mhm.
as for me, it has two sides. Like there is this like I need to move the energy through my body to like manifest into life whatever idea I had as a first manifestation of sound, and then like it can ripple out into like more physical stuff. But on the other hand, there is the recipient of that message. So the person who's listening, if there's someone listening, if I'm not talking to myself, then there is this other way of manifesting, because this can spark inspiration. This can spark like a yes or no, of course, but there is this second stage to it. And so what I've done a long time and still do is like I don't journal, but I do vocal journaling. So I record my own voice. I say everything that needs to get out of me to be manifested. And that's a tool that I share with all of my clients. That is super important, but it's not to be mistaken for what you just said, that there is this part of sharing, especially with the female energy, to have someone to actually receive your wisdom in a judgmental way, in a not like I'm not trying to make you do whatever I do, but I want to share and you take out whatever is important for you out of my message.
Mhm. I think, a lot of the things that I see working with women through their, I don't like to call it blocks, but through the process they're going through, whatever they are encountering, when we share with other women, we are acknowledging that we have a fear of being judged if we do that thing that we were talking about, right? So it's such an interesting, survival mechanisms have been somehow jam-packed into so many different ways around being accepted, especially for women, because I feel that there's this unconscious or conscious, depending on who the woman is, fear of not being a good woman or not being loving. If we say our truth, if we follow our path, if we are outspoken, if we call a spade, if we change our life, how does that fit into the box of what a woman should be, right? Because culturally, women were like supporters. And, like in the background of history. And so I've noticed that like holding circles for women, there's to say how you're doing, even for some women, it's like And then you add the layer of how am I doing spiritually, which some people may or may not relate to, right? It's takes a lot of courage because we fear judgment or rejection or not being enough or not being, together, right? And so that I think as well is really powerful with the voice of like saying what's real for you. The other person doesn't need to offer advice or
Mm-hmm.
even relate. But if they can hold space for us, I think that's deeply relaxing for the nervous system for a lot of women.
Yeah, and it's so necessary, I think. And we've touched upon it a few times, so I would love to like consciously bring it up. There is this like deconditioning process that for me goes hand in hand with spiritually growing. Before we can put something beautifully new inside, we need to like let go of some of the stuff that is not serving us. It had its place, I'm sure, but we have, especially as women, been conditioned to like be the good girl, be the good mother, take care of everyone else before even looking at our own needs, physical, mental, spiritual, however. And shifting that, there is lots of resistance from society, lots of resistance from our own paradigms that we have programmed with to say, like, can I, especially as a mom, you've touched on that before, can I take care for myself, even if I have a young child? Or is that selfish and therefore bad? There has been this, like, if you do something for yourself, if you care for yourself, that's somehow bad. But actually, it's the opposite. And this is such a big one, I think, that we almost need to shift to evolve as a society, but also just for our own sake and for the sake of our family and for the sake of our children. It's necessary to say, like, love, I love you, but now I need to take some time for myself. Later on, I'm much better to hold space for you. I'm much more calm. I'm much more present. This is necessary, setting a boundary for a loving boundary for a short time to then come back more open and not just to give until you're totally depleted and then maybe yelling at your child, which you didn't want in the first place. So this selfishness, this deconditioning from this whole patriarchal system of do, function, work, quiet, that's such a huge thing we're in the midst of.
We are definitely shifting that. And that was actually the catalyst when I moved to Bali, 2021. In my being, I knew I didn't move here to teach yoga and be known in Bali as yoga. I knew in my soul that part of my career as a full-time yoga teacher was done. There was another chapter because I was already writing for women. I'm communicating for women for what they want to create in the world. And it was really fascinating to see how quickly women don't operate the same, to be able to stand up and speak and share and feel valid in being worthy of whatever they were sharing. There's this whole other process that I did not see men going through. And working really closely with women, it was like, oh, these aren't a lack of talent or a lack of skills. It's actually the energetics that woman is carrying to want more, ask for more. This is a huge one. Ask for more. Put yourself out there and be proud of who you are. Like, it's massive when you really see how collectively it's every woman has to go through this journey in order to step forward with what she really wants to do with her life, not just, move to Italy because it's got pasta and great, which I totally love the idea, but to say what you desire is wild, it's wild.
That's
yeah. It didn't really strike me until I became a mom and then I saw even more of the layers. Like, what now? I'm not supposed to create this rich life that I'm still always in conversation with. Like, no, but you're supposed to now mother.
Mhm.
Well, what is dinner times at 6 every night? My soul has been at work for quite a few years. Like, there's more here. There's more. And I have more to offer because I've, I think, gone through those questions and seen the conditioning that so many women are, I think, becoming more aware of. And it doesn't need to be a big struggle either. I want to say that because there's a lot of women in motion at the moment. I see a lot of women really seeing, I guess, their own shackles or their own permission slips. They're seeing kind of where the where they've held themselves here to feel safer or whatever, manageable. And now everyone, no, there's a bit of growth happening within the feminine, I feel, though, that women can really, when you hear someone speak and there's this like resonance, that's why I called my podcast Female Resonance, people give each other permission to like be you, like really, there's something special about seeing someone shine. It almost transfers, I feel like, energetically.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. From what I see or everything that I've studied, especially Kabbalah talks about it a lot. Like the moment you hold space for someone else, and especially if you feel triggered through what they say or how they behave in any way, that is such a like alchemizing work that could take away pain from that person that you're just in conversation with, but also it could help you clean up stuff in your own life. It cleans up your energy. So I see energy moving when I see two people in conversation, especially when someone is like, having their hands like this, and there's a bit of but they make the effort to still be there. And like you say, I love female resonance as a word statement, to be in resonance with that person and to move with them for even a short period of time through their life. That can clean up a lot of energy in like everyone's field. And therefore it's like the spiritual cleanup service, we do a lot of work there that we don't even conscious. But of course we can also withdraw and say like, oh, you're not for me. That's totally fine too. But the one thing is you're expanding, and the other thing is like you're not, maybe not contracting, but there's a boundary that might be necessary that moment. But if you can open that up and like really go there, I feel that's a powerful thing to hold space for someone else.
I think in terms of boundaries, it's such a big, because we spoke about it briefly before we began. It's what I've discovered about boundaries is that they're more about you than they are about the situation, right? So when you can build that trust with your own safety, when you can build, and usually it will be a process of holding yourself through lots of different types of moments, because I don't believe that some are acceptable and some aren't. Like we're all going to experience what we're supposed to ultimately. And one thing that I actually went through a lot before I moved to Bali was understanding my own resistance to where my life was at. And as soon as I could see that nobody else was creating what was sitting in me, that boundary that I felt I needed to figure out where the line was, so I could keep certain people where I needed or wanted or was comfortable, I didn't need that anymore.
Yeah.
And so it was a process that took me about a year, but I do believe that we are always affecting each other. And I think that some of the conversations about healthy boundaries and spiritual boundaries, I think sometimes it has a negative spin, which makes people feel a little bit fearful of, what's being thrown or how do I navigate our entities. Yes, that exists. But what's more powerful is, why don't we flip the script and believe also that healing is happening, even if right? We're sorting through something. Maybe it's ancient. Maybe it's from lifetimes ago. Maybe we don't consciously always understand the outcome. But I do know that the way we view these boundaries, like it creates, I think, the response that our body has, right? So if we think, okay, I need a fortress around me, and I need just the right size of boundaries. But if we soften that idea and we just say, well, I'm going to hold space for my experience beyond this experience, no matter what, as best I can, underline as best I can. And if you need support, I'm going to get that too, right? That's part of it, is trusting that it will work out as well, right?
Yeah.
We're supposed to have this intensity sometimes in life, because that's how most of us grow, like the big growth,
Would you say that, because I see a big relation between trust and boundaries in any form? Boundaries can come spiritual, energetical, physical, because like you touched on that, like if you do trust yourself and trust to trust yourself to hold yourself, but also the trust with the universe. If you do have two, I feel boundaries aren't that much of a thing anymore.
Trust in the universe, I think, also requires releasing that, like I said, releasing where you are making it conditions, where you are saying it should be this way, but it's not, right? And that's where a lot of the resistance creates so much pain and discomfort. It's, I wanted it different, but I'm experiencing that, right? And when you can lean in and maybe not be as close to whatever the issue is and step back and just be, I think, in your own energy, it's like, there's always a lesson. And I hated hearing this when I was 20.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't want a lesson. I want to get married and have kids and I want it right now. And I don't need all these lessons. Like through that process, I also realized that to get everything that you want right when you want it, you won't have that same richness of whatever you want. Like,
yeah, no, I feel like it's so important. I love that you touched on this. It's so important sometimes to work ourselves through these like uncomfortable moments. Doesn't have to be like the big drama, but sometimes it has, to appreciate later on what we have. So it's about like really holding it.
like I said, I've known a lot of teaching yoga for a long time. I've known a lot of even well-known names, and I can say with clarity that their lives have not been straight lines.
Mhm.
The best healers that I know in the world are the ones that have gone through much probably more intensive transformation than, and so if you're listening and you're in a period of that, it doesn't mean that you need to take on this role of struggle. It just means that your life is asking something more for you.
Yeah.
And that's always been my case, even if I fought for a while about not liking it at the moment. But it gives you such, like I said, it gives you so much more perspective and appreciation for life and compassion for other areas of your life and people. And I think it's always made me just a better woman.
Yeah.
Like without the, where am I going? Who am I? What do I offer? Just a better person.
Wow. That is
Yeah.
so. There's like, even if it's uncomfortable, even if there's like a big lesson and you're resisting it and it's really like a struggle right now, that's a good thing in essential. It brings you closer to who you are. It helps you understand yourself. It helps you like grow or trust more or whatever your issue is. But there is like a lesson in it that needs to be learned. That's why it's coming up. And what I also love to share, because I had that for a long time, is it doesn't have to get worse. Just because
Yeah.
it's worse at the moment, it doesn't have to be that downward spiral. You at any time have the chance to say like, okay, I learned a lesson, thank you. And then everything can go back to smooth or even amazing. It doesn't have to be like, oh, I feel sick. I will always feel sick. I will be in a wheelchair in a year. Doesn't have to be. Not the case. The opposite.
100%. 100%. And back to the stepping out to really hear your intuition. When you're in an emotional space, I think it's important to feel your emotion. I think it's really important because I know Zen Buddhist monk teachers and many other disciplines that would say the opposite. Release your mind, release your emotions, get to the source and lean there. I don't feel that works for very many women personally. I feel like we need to move things. We are creators. And we need to let it kind of do its metamorphosis energetically, mentally, whatever. Move your body, get into the earth, swim, whatever it is. If we're not moving it, then it tends to kind of circle within us, haven't said it, if whatever our expression is. But I also think that there's a real process, especially right now, happening. If something isn't working in your life, it's going to come up.
Oh, yes.
But I had a friend for a lot of years that said this one beautiful thing that might help. And she said, struggling is optional. And I always, as soon as I heard her say that in a yoga class, I was always like, struggling is optional. Right. And it's like, that is so true because we decide
Yeah.
to keep struggling. Right.
Yeah. It's your perspective that helps you
Yeah.
or helps you get over it.
100%.
Wow. That's such a beautiful way to put it.
Yeah.
That it gives us back the empowerment to say like, okay, it's in my hands how I look at it. That reminds me of this book by Viktor Frankl. I don't know if you've read that, who has been in Second World War concentration camp, and he realized, he has been there for quite a while. He realized like no one can say how I feel. It's
Right.
me, even in that worst of worst situation, I can choose to feel inner peace, which is like
Mm-hmm.
nice to even say. Like,
The
and
most,
yeah,
sometimes that's what it needs. It's like surrendering to, because you can continue to try and climb the wall and maybe be safe or get away from what you're going through. But I think that that's really what I mean about the body in the container. It's like you allow yourself to feel whatever it is, the despair, the frustration, the fears, the doubts, but don't leave yourself there, right? It's like, you're doing yourself a disservice to believe that that's all life has to give you, right? It's like life's actually trying to make you kind of like push up against and figure out like a new way to do this dance, I feel, because we have so many years and we have whatever we're going to experience, but ultimately we get to shapeshift throughout the whole thing. Nobody else is telling us,
it always
it
comes back to us.
100%. And I think truly we have that conversation, whether we know it's that conversation, not our source, our soul, right?
Mm.
Our soul, a source within that's nudging us and kind of like cheerleading us, but maybe sometimes like giving us the elbow.
And even at the same time, like, so that, but
Love you. No.
yeah.
Yeah, I know. I feel that that's a lot of the work that I do. It's like permission to just be where you're at and also get creative with like, how do I rework, or how do I work with this, right?
Yeah.
Not how do I fix, how do I get away, how do I change the outcome? How can I work with this? How do I want to work with this?
Yeah.
Because everything's so unique that way.
Yeah, true. There is no looking at others to see like how they've done it. You can get inspired, you can get the signs, but it's not like their way is not your way, but you need to go your way. It's ultimately coming 100% back to yourself, how you
Yeah.
deal with it. However,
Yeah.
yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. I would love to touch on the work you do with your clients, because we mentioned that earlier, but we kind of drove off. Like I love the the spin that your life took from that very consistent yoga teaching to now having conscious female brands, like a totally like different, but then again not different way of working.
Well, there are moments where I question, like, because I'm being asked to now talk about money, and it dropped in last spring, 2023, and I was like, no, I'm a spiritual person. I
Money.
teach breath and space holding. But yes, it very much has been an evolution of. I think I'm really meant to work with people who are needing some support to step into that next version of themselves. And it mean that you need to hire the coach for a year or go to 10,000 masterminds or do a bunch of therapy or do 10 ayahuasca experiences. It's just like the way that I work is very quickly. I will see, and actually I work through words. So if someone's sharing who they are, what they do, within about 5 minutes, I can feel sometimes past lives, and sometimes they will tell me exactly why they're stuck without telling me why they're stuck. So a lot of it goes back to my years of teaching. Like, I watch bodies, I watch how happy they look, I can tell if somebody's just broken up, like, so these are things that I think come from teaching yoga.
Mm-hmm.
But then it deepened when I came to Bali, and it was really in the process of helping women write about what they do and how they want to share it, because most of it is wellness based, there's a few things that I really came forward. And one of them is like that belief that woman has, like we were saying, that belief in her value. And then that value turned into like money, but also this way of changing the entire way that women work with money, because it's not it's neither masculine or feminine. And some people have entire bodies of work saying it's one or the other, but it's really, again, this relationship, it's like your relationship to source. What do you want to make it?
Mm.
Do you trust it? How do you work with it? Are you bringing more in? Are you fearful of it? It's the same thing, right? Do you allow it to support you, or do you feel uncomfortable? Right? So all these like parts that I was discovering, I'm like, this is fascinating. Women have to go through a very different emotional, energetic rewiring of how to move forward in their lives, to be a bigger version, not necessarily to chase success or money, but to be a bigger version of themselves. And oftentimes it just ends up with their work, because we spend so much time, if we love our work, that, that's what we're doing in the world.
How we can express ourselves beyond our family and friends. So it's a huge part, or it can be.
Almost all of the women that I work with are serving others, right? So it's flipping that script of, doing work to becoming your own piece of artwork, really. And this is, I was teaching retreats about this 10 years ago. So it's very funny to see like the through line, that I could not have mapped in my head. It would have not made sense. I would have said like, no, I don't know anything about that, but I do now.
Amazing how life teaches us exactly the right things so that we can others. Isn't that just beautiful?
And it's not a dance that you can really make sense of when you're in it. You have to kind of learn to dance and to trust yourself.
Yeah, surrender. The universe knows better than we do. And that is often, in the moment, I feel it's often not that easy. I've talked about resistance to let go, but in hindsight, everyone I've asked ever said like, yeah, that made sense. I now know like why that happened, or at least I can have some form of peace of saying like, yeah, okay, there was something good coming out of it. I'd rather not experience it, but there was something good coming out of it. So in hindsight, like almost everyone says like, yeah, okay, the universe knows what it's doing. But in the moment, we're like kind of this thing. And that's what you say with the dance. I love that image. It's a trust. It's like being flexible. It's like being flow, but also standing in your presence. Everything is required in the dance. So this is not about shying away from everything and say, yeah, do whatever.
Yeah, no,
like
this is the opposite. This is an interesting, we could talk, I think, for hours, but it's a very different concept by what's out there right now with I talk a lot in women's circles. I also have men and women's circles, because to understand that difference, to be and flow, but where are those pillars that keep us steady in that transition, right? So these are really, we can talk about them as masculine and feminine.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people, we're discovering, like, is this my true nature? Or again, is this conditioning, right? Am I being in my flow if I keep just letting events play out and going with them? But actually, I want to say, like, this doesn't work for me, but this isn't really what I want. Yeah. So it's fascinating, because I think that we're getting back to like some true core spiritual elements, if you will, in a world that's very confused about what the heck that looks like. And is it right? It's true. Like, we've had some really big conversations in the last 10 years about so many things I think, that have added a lot of confusion to like, what is that healthy balance, which, is there for you to embrace. It's in nature. It's everywhere. That polarity. We live in that world of, we need to flow and we need to have steadiness. If we have too much of one or the other, it's going to cause conflict. It's going to be.
Yeah, I love that brings back like this concept we started with, that there are always two sides. There's like, you could say the light and the vessel, or however you want to call it, you and the universe. But there is this, you need to hold both. Or it is living the way you want, but that is also like surrendering to the universe. There needs to be both the ego and the surrender. There needs to be the presence and the letting go. It's like so many duality things here. And I feel often it's mistaken for some people just look at this side and say like, this is it, this is it, this is it. And then others say, this is it, this is it. But
yeah,
we need to merge. It's a time of like merging things together and seeing things can coexist, and they do beautifully if we remove some of our judgment there.
100%, and I can say that when you're new to something or when you're new to evolving or a spiritual path, most people cling to this is how it is or that teacher, because that's safe and that's how we kind of keep going. But really, I think the further you go, it's okay to be many sides, and it's okay to change what once worked for you into something that now suits this stage of life. In fact, I feel like that is what makes you the most adaptable as your life changes, right? Yeah. It's trusting that this process, don't look for the answers or go seeking. Don't think it's in a bookstore. God, that was like most of my teenage years was in the wellness section in the bookstore. I was like, I was going to find my answers, right? And it was not that. It was life and many, many steps and many steps to come, right? It's definitely a dance, and whatever stage your life is at is doing your best to support yourself in. They have a saying, and my friend has this men's circle, leaning in. He's always like, all the men ask me to lean in. Right? But it's kind of true.
Yeah, it has a masculine way of, I love that, lean in.
And he's like, I've been leaning in for a year. Sometimes that's the process. And I think so many things, tools, find the friends you can laugh with, move your body, sing, like find the joy and try not to over kind of focus on what's not working in your life too, right? Because that's another thing we can do as we're on a path of healing and transformation or shifting or learning things. We can over-focus and almost like grip too hard. I was the student because I was that devoted, and it's not always the best way. It's kind of just staying spacious, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Again, it's the balance, like to learn that you don't have to go all in at first, and then afterwards you're exhausted and you need to lay back. But like
people ping pong, like, you know what I mean? I'm going to see from watching students, they're like, I'm all into Ashtanga. And then they eventually 5 years later, they're like, I love yin.
Maybe you find something in the middle.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Trust that you're going to get there, I think, is my main message. And trust that you're already there too, right? It's like, there is nowhere to get. I think that that's also something I learned. The spiritual path continues to sometimes promote the idea that you have potential or could be, and I believe in growth and evolving, but there's also a lot of beauty in where we're at too and who we are now.
It's both, again, isn't it? You can get somewhere, but also you're always on a journey. So
yeah, and it's the journey that's been the most. I will write a book. It hasn't happened yet. Time-wise, it's been interesting, but there's pretty much that's the book. It's
how beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God. I could talk with you for hours. So maybe we're doing a part 2 at some time, because there's still
I'd love to.
question.
You can touch on all the energy work I've done, and all the different stages of that and what's out in the world. But I do hear a little person asking for a snack. So
You do. I thank you so much for your wisdom and your time, and oh my God, the work you do. I'm linking your Instagram in the bio below. Is there any other way you love people to connect with you?
Yes, you can find me on conscisousfemalebrands.com as well. And I'm running a special until next January. And then I'm raising prices and offering a few special things for women that want to go through a process. So yeah.
Fine. I will link that too in the show notes. And maybe within the new year we do a part 2.
Definitely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. Have a lovely, lovely evening and a wonderful holiday time.
You too. Thank you.
Bye, my dear. Goodbye.
Bye.